they have another place that they know that they can go to. They don't want to go there. That's why they're here, but they could go there. But the DACA kids are different because, for the most part, they don't know the place that they came from. They only know here. They only grew up here. That would be like sending you away or sending me away or your best friend away. And goes, okay, here's some country. You are genetically related to these people in this country. And we're going to send you there because you lack that little precious piece of paper that is what is required to get respect as a human being in this country. That's absurd. It's just really absurd. So, that's a big deal. And we struggle with that in the CU Immigration Forum, the problem that she was talking about, or that was being discussed in this article about how to tailor our services to fit the various people that need them. Because, it's hard. I mean, I don't know if you've ever tried to put on an event of some sort. Okay, that's a problem. You got to find a place to do it. You got to figure out what you're going to do in that event, like who's going to speak, who's going to, take care of providing punch and cookies, who's going to set up the seats, all the different things of getting the event together. That's hard enough. Then it's like, okay, well, we're going to have people here who speak different languages. So we need translations. How many translations do you get? How many languages are going to be needed? Naturally you tend to gravitate towards dealing with the most number of people need service X, so we provide service X. And we are heavily Latino-centric at the Immigration Forum because most of the people in this community who need our help are from that background. But that's not all of them. And we try to branch out in different directions and help different people at various times. But it's difficult. It's hard to find them. It's hard to get to know people in those communities. We were making inroads into the Guatemalan community for a while, and then that kind of died off. I mean, we're working on it. We're trying to do it, but it's not easy to do. So I can see why people from these the minority of the minorities often find themselves going, well, what is out there for me? Where is help for me? And it's difficult to find. It's because it's difficult to put together. Just got a fruit fly. What is that happening here? Anyway, sorry. I'm just ranting. So I should go on again. Once again, I have another article about DACA, which I can read you. This is just kind of interesting from a different perspective. So on here we had a DACA person in Texas who was feeling very left out of the conversation. That was one problem. Here's another aspect of the situation. Remember what I said earlier about inventing a problem and then having to come up with some solution for it? That is the Republican kind of take on immigration and the problem caused by illegal immigration or what have you. Here we have from Inside Higher Ed, which means higher education, an article entitled Princeton, Microsoft filed joint DACA lawsuit. Well, let's find out about that. So Princeton University and Microsoft have joined together to file a lawsuit against President Trump's rescinding of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. A DACA-protected student at Princeton, Maria de la Cruz Perales Sanchez, is also listed as a plaintiff. Trump announced a rollback of President Obama's executive order September 5th, though it isn't scheduled to be fully enforced until March, allowing Congress to come up with comprehensive legislation by then. The program allows temporary legal protection and work authorization renewed every 2 years for immigrants who were brought into the country illegally when under the age of 16. Because of the demographic that DACA protects, many colleges have become vocal about Trump's reversing of the program. Microsoft employs 45 DACA recipients, according to Princeton's statement announcing the lawsuit. The lawsuit, filed Friday in the U.S. District Court in Washington, is part of a litany of litigation filed in opposition to Trump's move on DACA. It argues that cancellation of the program violated the Fifth Amendment's guarantee of equal protection, as well as the Administrative Procedure Act. The lawsuit also asks the government to abstain from using the data that DACA recipients provide to the government in order to receive protection. And in case you missed it, the Administrative Procedure Act, we read a whole thing about this 2-3 weeks ago. Basically, it's when a procedure is put into place, there are certain processes that must be followed to in order to make that procedure valid, I guess you can say. And the argument is that in order to undo it, you have to sort of do those procedures in reverse. It's kind of, I'm not explaining this well, but that's sort of the process. You would be creating a new procedure to supersede the old one, and that one must be done under the same process as the old one. So that is an argument, but according to, at least to the source that we looked at a while back, that's not a good argument, because at the time that DACA came out, the then Obama administration publicly stated that this was not a procedure in the strictest sense of the word. So if it wasn't produced according to those guidelines, then its removal doesn't have to be produced according to those guidelines either. But that was just, anyway, just to explain what that part was all about. The Equal Protection Act, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. Anyway, I guess we're a little over halfway through the show. I should remind listeners who have forgotten and inform listeners who have since tuned in but missed my stating it in the first place, that you are listening to CU Immigration here on WRFU-LP, Urbana 104.5, and or UPTV at wherever you get UPTV, I guess cable TV or whatever. So, I don't know why I did that. So we're, my voice is getting rough. Makes me wish this was a half-hour show sometime. This is kind of interesting title. I didn't read this. I don't know what this is about. The title, well, I should let you know why I think it's interesting. It says, there's an immigration gap in how Latinos perceive discrimination. Kind of interesting. Okay, so let's just read the article. So it says, Valerie Pozo still gets angry thinking about it. It was about a decade ago, and the immigrant communities in her hometown, Salt Lake City, were on edge because of recent immigration enforcement raids in the area. Pozo's mother, an immigrant from Peru, was on the sidelines at her son's soccer game when another parent asked whether she was illegal. To me, that was clearly a racist question and a racist assumption, Pozo recalled. But her mother saw it as a harmless comment, despite Pozo's best efforts to convince her that it was something bigger. I said, here we are just like any other family playing soccer and doing things with our community, and we're constantly otherized, Pozo said. And I remember pointing that out, and no matter what we do, we'll always be seen as other or different. Excuse me. Her mother attributed the soccer parents' comment to the fact that immigration had been in the news, and the parents on the soccer team were so nice. It couldn't have been more than an innocent question. Poso says it has always been like this in her family. She notices the subtle ways that the white people in her community, nice as they may be, remind her family that it doesn't truly belong. Her mom thinks she is making a big deal about nothing. That is why her mother didn't want to be interviewed for this story. She has never been subjected to discrimination, she said. So what was there to say? A survey conducted by NPR, the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation found that Latinos born in the U.S., those like Poso, were nearly twice as likely as immigrant Latinos, those like her mother, to say that someone had used a racial slur against them or had made negative assumptions or comments towards them because of their race or ethnicity. Emilio Parado, a sociologist at the University of Pennsylvania, says this is not an unusual finding. It tracks with much of what is already understood about how a Latina's or Latino's immigration status affects how she or he perceives racism and discrimination. He says there are many possible reasons for this. One is that U.S.-born Latinos may in fact experience more discrimination because they are more likely than immigrants to be educated and ascending the economic and social ladder. This often puts them into contact and competition with white Americans for degrees, jobs, and political power. Discrimination is a strategy of the dominant group to protect itself, to protect the benefits that they had. So discrimination is something that emerges not when people are culturally different, but that emerges when people compete. Parado says there is another factor to explain why immigrant Latinos are much less likely to report having been subjected to discrimination than U.S.-born Latinos. They come from countries with different social and racial contexts. So when they first arrive, many don't understand race relations in the U.S. For immigrants, there is a process of learning that you are being discriminated against, he says. He says many immigrants will begin to notice ways in which they're treated differently or poorly, but not immediately attribute that treatment to race or ethnicity or the way they look. Immigrants tend to think that it's their own fault, Parado said. That is because they don't know the rules or they don't know English. But their U.S.-born children often know that that is not always the case because they do know the rules, they do speak English, and yet they often have the same or similar experiences as their parents. The children of immigrants, they know that it comes from ethnicity and not from the behavior of immigrants, Parado said. Karina Ramirez understands this. She grew up in the U.S. Her mother, Fabiola, grew up in Ecuador. They currently live in West Palm Beach, Florida. Ramirez, an independent journalist, says she has been followed around in fancy department stores simply because of the way she looks. Her mother has had similar experiences, but she didn't immediately think her appearance was the reason. She recalled one time when she was waiting in line at a bank. It was my turn, and a man came and cut in front of me, she said, speaking in Spanish. And the bank tellers were telling him it was my turn, but he demanded to be served before I was. I just stayed quiet. But back in her car, Hidalgo started to cry. I cried because I felt like the lowest person in the world, she said. But I thought to myself, well, I'm new to this country and I don't speak English, so maybe there had been something she didn't understand. Her daughter, Karina, gets emotional hearing her mother tell the story. She believes the thing her mother didn't understand was that in the U.S., she would be constantly subjected to racially motivated discrimination. When she started telling me about all these instances that she lived, it's like I wasn't there to stand up for her, to defend her, Ramirez said. She says she feels as if it's her responsibility to point out the ways that racial discrimination, even subtle racism, affects her mother's life. Her mother says that thanks to her daughter's lessons, she is learning, and unlike before, she is beginning to speak up. Okay, this turns into... That's weird. Then it turns into a transcript. Sorry, I didn't mean it to stop like that, but it turns into a transcript. So the first part, I guess, is talking about it, and the second part is the transcript of the conversation. So I won't read that because that's the same thing I just read. But it's a really a good point. I'm glad I read that article because it really brings up some interesting facts about how people perceive the way they're treated by other people. If, for one thing, let's say you're an immigrant and you're in a new place. Well, you know you're different. You know you are different. You came from this other place. You're here now. Everything about your background, your education, the way you do things, everything is different from this new place that you're at. So if people treat you as if you're different, well, yeah, of course, you would accept a lot of that, a whole lot of that, really, because, well, I'm different. So naturally, you're going to treat me as if I'm different. And you won't necessarily realize what the difference is that is inspiring this treatment. So to you, it's a whole package. Well, of course, I'm different. I've always been different. So naturally, people will treat me as different. So you will see it that way. And you might not realize that the only reason that someone has decided to behave in a certain way towards you is simply because of the way you look. They don't know all that other stuff. You know all that other stuff about yourself. You know all that huge history. And so it just seems like that might be obvious to people when they see you. Like, I don't know. I think sometimes we imagine that we carry our baggage like on our head and it's visible to all the world. So if you're depressed or if you have anxiety or all these different things, you imagine that it's just sitting there on your head and that everybody who looks at you goes, oh, there's a depressed person with anxiety coming. So I understand these facts about them, but you don't. That stuff is invisible. And so is a lot of this background that new immigrants might think is the reason that people are treating them differently. So yeah, that's really fascinating, and it would be interesting to talk to the two generations sometime and to have them exchange experiences and discuss that. I think that's a very interesting, fertile area for research to see how people imagine the reasons for their treatment. Anyway, I'm just blathering right now. So, what else? Okay, this is weird. I'm feeling that this is a misplaced article. Okay, it is. That's what I thought. So in this grouping of stories about immigration, one of the stories is entitled 12 Things About Dreamers You Should Know. So I thought, that could be interesting. But it's from Billboard magazine. And Billboard, in case you don't know, is a entertainment industry magazine. It's about the entertainment industry. So that's a little weird. And then the picture that goes with the story are three guys that look like a rock band of some sort, standing there. And so I wondered, and sure enough, Dreamers is a band. So I could read 12 things about this band Dreamers that you should know, but I don't care to know anything about them. So we'll skip that. But that was distracting. What else? A Wyoming county pursues a private immigration jail. Ugh. Here we go. This is weird. This is the one that said it didn't exist anymore. That's strange. I'll have to do a different one. Here we go. We talked about this before, but I'll read it again because it's coming up. This is from Slate, entitled State Department, Central Americans, Haitians, no longer need protection. We were expecting this. As I pointed out, kind of knew it was coming, but this is really hard. So the article reads as follows. The State Department told the Department of Homeland Security this week that a program protecting hundreds of thousands of Central Americans and Haitians from deportation should be nixed, reports the Washington Post. The program, known as Temporary Protective Status, shields more than 300,000 people currently living and working in the United States. But in a letter, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson told Acting Homeland Security Secretary Elaine Duke that conditions in Central America and Haiti no longer justify the protection provided under the program. TPS was set up in 1990 to protect foreigners from being deported to countries hit by political instability or natural disasters. By Monday, the Homeland Security has to decide the fate of about 57,000 Hondurans and 2,500 Nicaraguans whose protections will expire in January. Later this month, it will also have to decide the fate of around 50,000 Haitians who benefit from TPS. The Trump administration has long said the program was supposed to be temporary, but has taken a semi-permanent status. Some in the administration are even trying to suggest that getting rid of the program could actually benefit Central America and Haiti because their citizens will return with job skills, democratic values, and personal savings acquired from living long-term in the United States, notes the Post. The countries that could see an influx of arrivals disagree, though, and some say that the move could hurt the U.S. economy. The Hispanic Caucus took to Twitter Friday night to point out that ending TPS and deporting legal workers would cost the country $164 billion in GDP over a decade. Nixing the program could also cause families to forcibly split, as the Center for American Progress says TPS beneficiaries have almost 275,000 children who were born in the United States. Although there's obviously no guarantee that all in the program would be deported right away, it would be very easy for law enforcement to find them, as Homeland Security has all their personal details. So, we knew that was coming, or let me rephrase this. We suspected that this was coming, but it's just another blow, another large group of people who are just going to be uprooted and sent away. Slightly different situation from DACA and the other ones, but it's still very painful, to put it mildly. A lot of really awful situations are going to develop because of this. But again, it's just that these guys, I hate to keep pointing the finger, but it's hard not to because they're all Republicans and they all share this idea. I don't know if how many actually believe it, but some of them believe it, I'm sure. Some are acting in good faith in terms of their beliefs, but I think most of them are just acting as because it's politically convenient for them to pretend that they think all these immigrants are a problem. So it's kind of, if you think about it, like you take the entire spectrum of immigrants here in this country, and then you just divide that down to just people who are undocumented. And you take the entire group, they're starting with the very best people that they can find and sending them away first. And I hate to rate people by, some kind of imaginary hierarchy, but people with good track records, people who are have done well and are forging ahead and building lives, people that they know are doing that. So maybe I should put that, not better people, but people who on paper are better people who have better resumes, so to speak. They're taking the people with all the good resumes and they're trying to ship them away first. It makes no sense at all. It's self-defeating in every possible way to do that. At least formerly known as Deporter-in-Chief Obama, who was, sending people away at a rapid clip, at least that was concentrating on people with legal problems. If nothing else, that was at least doing that. Even if a lot of the people that were being sent out had very minor problems like traffic violations or driver's license issues or things like that, at the very least, they were people with legal problems who were caught up in the legal system. You can at least say that much about it. Whereas with Trump and company, or Chump and company, I think is a better way of putting it, they're just like, they don't even care, It's like, it doesn't matter what you're doing or why you're doing it or how well you do it or anything. We just don't like you because you're not from here. That's apparently the thinking. So they don't care. So they're like, oh, DACA? Yeah. People who have been carefully selected and vetted to be, at least on paper, whose resumes are the best of the best. Yeah, let's get rid of them right away. And, everybody else too. Let's just get rid of everybody. I don't know how we're going to survive the next 3+ years. It's just terrible. Anyway, I'm just running out of steam here. So this has been, and continues for the next minute or so, to be, the CU Immigration here on WRFU, slow down, CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana, 104.5 FM. We appreciate you tuning in. I didn't have much of an overriding theme on this show, but I guess DACA once again was kind of a theme. That's going to be hard to avoid until there's some resolution on that, because that is a really big deal. And for those of us who know, a lot of DACA recipients, it's harder still because you understand their stories and you realize just how disruptive it would be for them to be sent away. I know other people who have been here for years and years and who have made lives and all that, but I also know that they have a history and that they have something to go back to is maybe a stretch, but just some kind of understanding of what they're going back to. But a lot, not all, but a lot of the DACA people don't. They have a knowledge of it, but they have no real personal understanding. It is literally sending them away to a foreign country. It'd be like if you told me I had to go to Belgium. Sorry, we're sending you to Belgium. That's where you're going. No two ways about it. See ya. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. That's kind of what it's like for a lot of people. And I just think that's awful. So I've said it before. I'll say it again. It's awful. It's bad. We shouldn't do it. Let's protect our people here in this country. And by our people, I mean all our people, not just the ones that have those little citizenship papers. Anyway, this has been CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.